pick, defensive lineman Armondo Blount, flipping his commitment from Miami to Florida State. But wait, there's more. He then announced his reclassification to the 2024 class. So with it, he is now the number 39 player in this current cycle. Now, we're about to break down the story extensively. But Blair, just how fun have these battles between the Canes and the Noles on the trail been to follow?
It's everything we could have hoped, or these head-to-head battles and eventual flips have been so fascinating. We knew Mike Norvell and his staff would not just stand around when Mario Cristobal came back to the state, and they have delivered. This is what makes recruiting so fun to follow.
This is kind of a tricky story to follow, though, because you might be thinking, hey, didn't we just do a rankings update? So what happens when a player becomes a late addition to the class? Well, we had some of those same questions, so we are bringing in our director of scouting, Andrew Ivins, to help us make sense of all of it. So, Andrew, how do you go about slotting in Armondo Blount into this 2024 group after his reclassification?
Well, reclassifications for football, I mean, it's not like college basketball. You follow college basketball recruiting, you have kids jumping all the time in between classes. In college football, it's been pretty rare, but I don't think it's going away. We've seen more and more of it here recently. With Armondo Blount, you know, this is a guy we like, right? And obviously we had him ranked super high in the 2025 cycle, but when you try to slot him in with these 2024 rankings, this is where we see him at number 39, number 9 defensive lineman. Now, I'll caution this and say, hey, our rankings are not finalized for the 2024 cycle. We still have 2 more updates. Armondo Blount was a guy that was committed to play in the 2025 Under Armour All-America game. I would assume we're going to get him here in the 2024 Under Armour All-America game before he makes his way to Tallahassee. But it's this reclassification. We're kind of learning about it. And you know, about 24 guys have done it so far over the years, dating all the way back to John David Booty in the 2023 cycle. It's normally been a lot of quarterbacks, but there have been some defensive linemen, some skill players. And the biggest takeaway is you're going to need a developmental year or 2, which isn't surprising. I mean, these guys are, you know, moving up a year. They're no longer the biggest kid. They're no longer the fastest kid, and they're kind of resetting their clock. So that's where we see Armondo Blount right now, just kind of compared to some of these other defensive linemen. We still like his upside. You know, number 39 overall for us would essentially be a round 2 grade. We're going to see how he finishes out this season. And then again, maybe hopefully we'll get him in that Under Armour All-America game.
Andrew, you've mentioned in the past how important a junior film is in the evaluation of a player, and in particular with Armondo Blount in this case. How difficult, or what are the challenges now as we evaluate his junior film as his senior film?
Well, I think, you know, we see what's unique about Armondo Blount is he's actually a kid that played some varsity football as an 8th grader at Fort Lauderdale Dillard High School. So he's got a few more years than usual under his belt. But oftentimes what we see with these prospects as juniors and seniors, they take major steps forward from a developmental standpoint. They're playing with more confidence. So it's a little bit difficult. Now, we do have some data points on Armondo Blount. We know he's elite in the lower half. You guys were watching those clips earlier. He's explosive. This is a kid that's won a state title, an AAU national title in the shot put. He's 4'5" on the short shuttle. He's got a 30-inch vertical jump. So we've seen some of it, and we've seen some of it this fall at Miami Central as he has transferred in to there. It's not ideal. Having talked with a number of college staffers around the country over the past few weeks, I've been kind of working on a story about this reclassification. I mean, you want to get as much exposure and as much data you can get with a prospect. With Armondo Blount removing that senior season, it kind of muddies up the evaluation a little bit more. But we still think he's a good prospect, and we'll see, you know, what he does when he's able to get to Tallahassee.
Yeah, I'm sure that heats things up for you guys, too. The scouting team and his evaluation, Florida State fans are just excited to get him a year earlier. But from your standpoint, you're trying to gather all of that film. So I like what you said. This is not a finished product with any of these rankings. So looking forward to seeing what happens with him the rest of this cycle. Andrew, thank you for breaking that down for us. You mentioned your story. You can read that on 247sports.com, all about these reclassifications. Also, these two, Andrew and Coop, are going to discuss this kind of interesting situation in depth on the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. That's tomorrow, so make sure to check it out. Okay, then there is the matter of his big-time flip. So for that, we're bringing in our director of recruiting, Steve Wiltfong, and this is exactly what I keep saying. It's a tricky situation. There's a lot of strings to pull at. So Steve, I mean, what a win for Florida State to get Blount to flip his commitment from Miami. How did this all go down?
Well, Florida State's the program that led for him much of his process. In fact, he took that visit to Miami for the Hurricanes win over Texas A&M and kind of surprisingly jumped in the fold for the Hurricanes. I know he's a Miami kid, and Mario Cristobal and his staff do a great job, but I think he just got caught up in that moment and that energy and that excitement. Obviously, he liked Miami, but Florida State is the program that was on him early, got him to campus a bunch, was the program that he's loved for the majority of his process. And now they have him in the fold. Another monster recruiting win for Mike Norvell and his coaching staff. They beat Georgia and Ohio State, among others, for KJ Bolden. They hold off Penn State for Luke Kromenhoek. Now they beat Miami for Armondo Blount. They flipped Landon Thomas from Georgia. So this is a staff in Tallahassee that's showing that they have the recruiting chops to go toe-to-toe with any program in the country, any head coach in the country, and get their fair share of wins as they're trying to maintain a program now that's in the national title hunt.